Tonight, on Court of the Crane, we revisit a story that has haunted South Korea for more than a decade. It is the story of Jang Ja-yeon, an actress whose name became synonymous not only with the glamour of television drama, but also with the shadows of coercion, exploitation, and systemic pressure in the entertainment industry. Her death in 2009 was not only a tragedy, it became a catalyst for public outrage, legal scrutiny, and a reckoning with power itself. This is the story of Jang Ja-yeon, fame, fear, and the questions that refused to go away. Jang Ja-yeon was born on January 25, 1980, in North Jeolla Province. She entered the entertainment industry in the mid-2000s, gradually building a career that culminated in a prominent role in the 2009 drama Boys Over Flowers. The series propelled her to national recognition, but behind the camera, those close to her later reported growing distress. Friends and acquaintances described a young performer constrained by demanding contracts, limited autonomy, and the intense pressures of a highly competitive industry. The very structures that promise fame also seem to restrict freedom and weigh heavily on her. Behind the glitz and acclaim, pressures were mounting, and pressures would later make her story one of national security. On March 7, 2009, Jang Ja-yeon was found dead in her Seongnam home. Authorities ruled her death a suicide. In the days that followed, reports emerged that she had left behind documents alleging coercion and mistreatment by industry figures. These reports sparked intense media attention, public shock, and calls for investigation. Colleagues remembered her as bright and kind, yet visibly burdened in the weeks before her death. Some noted she confided in close friends about extreme pressure from those around her. Under South Korean law, suicide cases with suspicious circumstances require thorough investigation. Police seized computers, phone records, and agency files. But despite initial scrutiny, many questions remained. Who authored the documents? Which allegations could be substantiated? And how far did accountability extend beyond those immediately charged? In 2010, authorities brought limited prosecutions. Jang's manager and her agency's CEO faced legal action, receiving convictions on related abuse charges. Sentences, however, were largely suspended, drawing widespread criticism. Observers and victims' advocates argued that these measures addressed only a fraction of the allegations. Broader industry practices, contracts critics called slave contracts, left young performers vulnerable to coercion and exploitation. Jang's case became a flashpoint highlighting systemic pressures in the entertainment sector. Under the Korean Penal Code, charges of assault, coercion, and sexual violence each carry prison terms. But prosecutors brought only a narrow set of charges, primarily assault and abuse of authority by her agency CEO and manager. These charges resulted in suspended sentences, meaning the convicted individuals avoided prison if they met conditions of probation. To the public, this seemed like a slap on the wrist, failing to address the larger allegations of systemic exploitation. For many, the legal outcome fell short of justice. The narrow scope of prosecution and the suspended sentences underscored the challenges victims faced in seeking accountability for structural abuses, rather than isolated misconduct. For nearly a decade, civil society groups kept Jang's story alive, demanding deeper investigation. In 2019, amid renewed public pressure and other high-profile sex crime scandals, prosecutors reopened the case. Investigators reviewed thousands of documents and interviewed over 100 witnesses. In the end, authorities announced insufficient evidence for new indictments and noted that some potential charges had surpassed statutory limitations. Among those interviewed was a public witness known as Yoon Ji-ho. Her statements became the subject of legal disputes, and her case highlighted how South Korea's strict defamation laws influence both testimony and public debate. Allegations that cannot be substantiated in court can carry legal risk for those who make them, even if they are true. Jang's death catalyzed national discourse. Online memorials, petitions, and media campaigns demanded transparency and accountability. The term slave contract entered public conversation, sparking calls for reform in talent management. The case intersected with wider societal issues. Over 230,000 citizens signed petitions for investigation, framing Jang's story not only as an entertainment scandal, but as a labor rights issue. Public attention helped fuel a broader Me Too conversation in South Korea, encouraging survivors of harassment and abuse to speak out, and challenging entrenched power structures. To understand Jang Ja-yeon's impact, we examine other cases that reshaped South Korea's public discourse on abuse and accountability. Prosecutor Seo Ji-hyun publicly described experiencing sexual harassment within her workplace. Her testimony, shared at a media event and later in interviews, drew widespread attention to entrenched hierarchical pressures in Korea's prosecutorial system. Public opinion was largely supportive, with many applauding her courage and citing the case as a catalyst for the country's broader Me Too movement. Her disclosure prompted internal reviews and discussions about reforms in workplace protections for public servants. This scandal involved a Gangnam nightclub and allegations of drug use, sexual assault, and improper conduct with some entertainers and nightclub staff. Several individuals faced an investigation. Notably, singer Seungri was convicted of mediating prostitution and illegal gambling, receiving a prison sentence. Media coverage revealed intense public scrutiny, with citizens expressing concern about corruption, celebrity influence, and law enforcement responses. Other reported allegations, such as police collusion, were extensively debated in the press, but did not result in convictions. Public protests and online discourse highlighted widespread demands for transparency and systemic reform. Actor Oh Young-soo, internationally known for Squid Game, was convicted in 2024 of sexual harassment for conduct that occurred in 2017. He received a suspended prison sentence and was forced to undergo a mandatory treatment program. Media coverage emphasized both the accountability of high-profile figures and the complexity of enforcement under Korea's legal system. Public commentary was divided. Some hailed the conviction as precedent-setting, while others debated the sufficiency of the sentence relative to the seriousness of the offense. Each of these cases demonstrates the interplay of courtroom outcomes, media reporting, and public opinion. They collectively illustrate how social pressure, transparency, and legal decisions shape evolving conversations in South Korea about workplace abuse, sexual harassment, and institutional accountability. In 2013, Korea extended the statute of limitations for sex crimes involving minors, and in 2015 abolished the statute entirely for certain serious offenses. Labor laws were also revised to limit unfair slave contracts in entertainment. Yet activists argue that enforcement lags and the cultural stigma still prevent victims from reporting abuse. South Korea's legal environment affects who speaks, how investigations proceed, and what victims are willing to disclose. Criminal defamation laws in Korea have been used in ways that sometimes chill victims' testimony and journalistic inquiry, even when allegations later prove accurate, because the burden and risks of proving public interest can be high. Investigations into Jang Ja-yeon and subsequent high-profile cases demonstrate two realities. First, that institutional inertia and evidentiary barriers can prevent prosecution, even when public pressure demands it. Second, that social movements and public scrutiny can reshape policy debates about statutes of limitation, workplace protections, and policing practices. South Korea's defamation law is unusual. Even factually true statements can be prosecuted if deemed not in the best interest. This has been repeatedly used against journalists and survivors who name abusers. For survivors of sexual abuse, the risk of a defamation countersuit is a powerful deterrent, a dynamic visible in the Jang case and many that followed. The death of Jang Ja-yeon remains an unhealed wound in South Korea's cultural memory. It is a story of a rising star, silenced too soon, in a society that continues to grapple with the weight of her testimony. Her legacy lives on in the voices of those who come forward after her. Together, they reshape public consciousness, proving that, even in tragedy, truth can ignite change. This has been Court of the Crane. If you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and comment with the cases and topics you'd like us to examine next. And remember, in Jang Ja-yeon's memory, we must continue to hold power accountable, challenge systemic abuse, and ensure that silence is never the only option.